everyone, we're almost there. So we had a great meeting in Berlin, right? And I did a couple of shout outs during it. So if you hear your name, you're more than welcome to say hi. But let me go back here. So the genesis of this talk was actually a series of conversations I had with you in I think fall 2021. So it's been cooking for a couple of years. And I'm glad I had the opportunity to sort of get our community involved now in the potential for this technology and how we can utilize optics. And this is going to be kind of a fun talk. The reason is I did my semiconductor laser work at UC Santa Barbara. And I just sat through 3 talks and it's like I haven't left, right? I'm like still there and it's remarkable. I'm almost ready to put in my dissertation topic, right? And I also wanted to make a point that personally I've been at this a while and it's good to see as things mature, right? I've been at this UV thing for a while and I had this IUVA healthcare event and Richard Vincent was my speaker, but he's not here. Then I had this food and beverage and I think Amanda from New Zealand just talked about it. And if she's here, talk to Tatiana Kuchma, right? So there's plenty of people to talk to in this industry. So here's my corporate pitch and I'll make 2 points. One is we make mirrors that are asymmetrical, that are polarization maintaining, that are freeform, elliptical, parabolic today. We're wavelength agnostic. We work with all suppliers. And I really like Leo's description of steering and driving and directing because I've been joking with some of my colleagues. We're like the photon Uber or the photon Waze, right? You want to put a photon somewhere, like use my app and you'll get there. So I have an agenda and it gets more and more fun. And I think the last 1 or 2 slides are the most intriguing and maybe most interesting, and maybe we'll elicit some creative thinking. So I'll run through the first few pretty quick. So we make this little parabolic capability. It's reflective, it's smooth, it's good from 207 to actually 10,000 nanometers. It's aluminum, we do no post-processing, it's chemical free, no grinding. It's very sustainable. And you can see it's actually not that cumbersome, right? It's kind of low profile. It's a really neat little piece of optic. And here's my first shout out to Cameron Miller of NIST, because we wrote a paper together and he actually confirmed our simulations are testing at NIST. So we know you sort of get what we tell you're going to get. So we're like a 4-star Uber driver at this point, right? So we did some early comparisons earlier this year that I showed at Berlin, but we have a nice test setup. I think Crystal IS, Audex Electronics, we tested some of their parts, some of Stanley Electric's parts. We showed a really nice beam shape, right? Compared to like a Fresnel lens, it's very lossy because it's silicon, right? So, and it's refractive. So we could basically narrow beam, concentrated beam, and clearly we can project it far into space. We sort of overcome the inverse square law a little bit because we're not quite at a laser diode, but we're getting there. And one day I hope we're obsoleted by it because it's really slick technology. Then this is really interesting. We looked at it for upper room air, right? So we were like, if you use these UVC LEDs, I know we're far UV today, but I'm going to make a point here. You can actually create horizontal mists with an asymmetrical optic. You can actually create a curtain of light well above my bald head, right? I'll never get a straight photon. I'll be safe using UVC LEDs. You can project contour lines into space and control them very well. It's a little flying saucer. We call that bat wing. There's some folks that have a lot of interest in that ability to have only in the positive y-axis well above our heads. And, I'm going to give you a hint what happens next. That's horizontal. If you tilt it vertical, now you have curtains, right? So you have some interesting capabilities with these simple little optics, right? And then we said, okay, let's do a little bit with the Selena device, right? Lovely little device, right? Works great. We're not a partner with them. I said I'm agnostic, but it's just, I decided let's look at Selena UV 235. I think Crystal's sending me parts next week, so I'll get a comparison, right? And again, we looked at it with a Fresnel lens, a refractive lens, and you really get nothing in the far field because it's so lossy. But with a nice little 10-degree full width half maximum, or you get a pretty tight beam, and it's pretty intense in the middle. So it has some interesting potential for applications, right? I mean, you get this nice little beam, and given that we're fiber optics folks at our heart, we could couple it into things. So that was the first application we thought of. So let me move on here. And then we looked at it a second time, and we even got better results because we had some misalignment with the board. So we got a new board from that. Great application support. So now we really have a great tight beam, really high intensity, and we can project much further into free space. So an application exercise, as we've been talking about the first 3 talks, a little energy, a little time, and you're progressing the innovation, right? So then what did I do here? I said, what's the application number 1? I guess I just said this is number 2, but let's see if I had number 1 here. No, I went right to number 2. So number 2 is we want to look at this for sensors, right? And the key area is water treatment sensors for nitrate detection. You can use it for gas sensors. You can use it for any analytics, right? And that's actually, I think, where Crystal IS made its name in this wavelength. They support these applications. But the real challenge you have, and this is a paper that came out of, I think, the Chinese Analytic Journal, is that you have to somehow take a device with a spherical ball lens that's lossy, but look at all those rays. They're going everywhere right into the pipe. So now you're getting a tremendous signal to noise ratio hit because you can't couple your precious photons that are still a little bit expensive into a sensing application that requires to get a good signal to noise ratio, much more optical power so it can interact with the nitrates that have been put in the pipe, right? So we know that there's a market for this. It will replace these colorimetric little sticks. I mean, they're like the same as the dose cards you use, but they detect nitrites, and they'll replace xenon lamps, which are bulky and expensive and take a lot of power. So if you want like mobile nitrate water contamination testing, you really want to look at a Far-UV LED. You want to remove the dependence on a ball lens. You want to use a little more that can project it with small spot size with much more intensity. You do a little XYZ calculation, the numerical aperture of the pipe, and you can introduce much more optical power into that sensor and boost your signal to noise ratio. So that was our first thought. Why don't we work with Selena and Crystal and look at some of the applications globally for improving sensors. Then it got more interesting. I was like, okay, this is what Ewan and I talked about a couple of years ago. Now we know we can direct and project and steer and drive UV radiation into space, right? How about occupied space, right? So I did not do optics on an Ushio lamp yet, although I think that may be forthcoming, right? Because it seems like, why not try it on the leading technology? I did it on LEDs, right? So our thinking was, now we can complement these mists above our heads with vertical capabilities, because now we can make curtains or compartmentalize the room. We can sit there and go, let's make like a tic-tac-toe board in 3D space, because now we have the optics to control the light. And you can choose your emitter, you can choose your wavelength, you can choose your contour lines in space that you want to achieve dose in. You have much more control. You're a little less dependent on airflow because you can bring the light where you want to put it in any pocket of a room. You just choose your wavelength. You can control the TLV. So now you have more control over your radiation because you have optics that allow you to place the photons and groups of photons anywhere you want in enclosed space, even odd geometries, right? Because we can make optics that, as I said, look like flying saucers. We have optics that make things go sideways. So you can do peripheral work. You can have one emitter that comes out, and the same emitter with optics, you can go to the sides, right? So now you have the ability to place them out at your leisure, and you just decide in that application, that enclosed space, with that airflow, with that pathogen load, with those people there, you can decide where you want to put the light and when you want to put the light. So we can tilt them and judiciously put them throughout the room. That's my tic-tac-toe board. We can optimize the short range or proximity with mid-range interventions, right? So now you have the ability to sit there and go, why don't we do some interesting things at seat level or at standing level or above any level, right? Because we have the ability to place the photons in that 3D space anywhere we want to put them. So now we can overcome we put the TLV that you want with Far-UV at the mouth level, the point of breathing. And now we can control that with even more fine-tuned capability because there's optics available that allow you to fine-tune the placement of the radiation. So I'm going to use the O word. There it is. So now you can actually, knowing that you can mix and match wavelengths, mix and match emitters to do what you want in free space, one could sit there and go, hold it. I got this O problem or proposed O problem, or maybe it's not an O problem, but why don't we figure out, can the 268 nanometer actually, in a sense, disassociate the ozone as it's being produced by moving photons at 222. Like in the wake of a 222 photon, you put a 268 photon, right? And then you don't have your O problem anymore. Now you might have an OH problem, but pick your poison, right? So one thing you could do is just anywhere near any emitter, you just have a little couple $10 worth of UVC LEDs and you'll pass 867 every time. If it's within 20 centimeters, you'll never have a problem. So let's maybe deal with the O problem. This is my commercial hat by using our friendly UVC LEDs, but with a Nuccio lamp or a Lumileds lamp or a NS nanosecond, emitter or Eden. We're agnostic. So then I'm like, let's make a business of doing something that exists already, right? Because we're going to wait a while before we can make money doing ceiling base. But why don't we have a installed base? So why don't we just add some of these LEDs to installed base of robots, or even robots with these lamps? And again, you can just do what you got to do with these. You can even do swivels and nozzles of LED. So I'm going to wrap up with one last slide. There's a cool slide. So let me explain this slide. And it actually, Ed gave me a great presentation the other day. And I've heard about DNA tracing, and I've heard about how do we know where the radiation goes and its interplay. So I challenged the 9-year-old in her Girl Scout troop to win their STEM badge. I said, show me how you can show radiation in a room. And they came up with fluorescent paint. And they knew how to trace the contour lines in space with targets. And now we know we can visualize 268, 254, 235, 222. The fluorescent paint has a second feature. It also has energy absorption, and it has lasting power. So if you know how much energy it lasted for, you know how much energy into it. What you have here is a 3D dosimeter, right? Using fluorescent paint that a bunch of 9-year-old Girl Scouts figured out for the industry. And you can augment Ed's idea of patches. And the last point I make with this is, you know what they did after they did this? They took New Year's Eve confetti poppers, and they popped confetti laced with fluorescent paint into the same scene. And what did they do? They showed foam lights interacting with radiation. Pretty clever girls, right? So thank you. So I hope that was informative. All right.
Take time for one question.
Okay, I'm off the hook.
Yeah, you're off the hook.